Hey, Couch Potatoes, here's one that I recorded back in 2020. It was the first time on Mike's Book Reviews that I actually branched out and talked about something non-book related. So it was the debut of the Off the Book segment before I even called it Off the Books, but it's talking about my favorite science fiction television shows of all time. I hope you enjoy. Hey, what's up, bookworms and science fiction nerds? Mike here today to talk a little TV with you for a change. I think everyone's got to take a quick little reading break now and then to talk about something else. And something that comes up on the Discord and in live streams quite a bit are, what are some of your favorite science fiction television shows? I mean, this comes up constantly. So I thought it would be a perfect way to kick off this new series called Reading Break. Again, don't worry, these aren't going to take over the channel or anything like that. I'm not becoming a multimedia channel. I am still just books, but I think one of these every 3 or 4 months is fine, right? At least I hope so. I hope that you'll give me some good feedback here and let me know what you think about these and what some of yours are. Now, here are a couple of ground rules here, and this might seem a little controversial. I am only picking one series per franchise. So yes, things like Stargate and Star Trek are going to be tough. It's going to be tough choices. So if you're like, I can't believe you didn't have this series on here, it was just a stupid little rule I made so this list didn't get convoluted. I want to keep it tight and just to, you know, some series that maybe you don't know as much about, and this might give you some interest in them. So there we go, guys. Obviously, these are only series that I've watched. If you're looking for a particular one, I haven't watched it. Obviously, I can't put it on here. But these are 15 that I absolutely loved, and I want to talk about briefly. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Oh, before I do that, I do want to say no Buffy the Vampire Slayer on this. Why? Because I consider Buffy to be fantasy. I consider all vampire stuff to be fantasy. Supernatural is going to be fantasy. Anything like that is going to be fantasy, and that's why it's on this list. For me, science fiction is mostly spaceships, aliens, and lasers. So there we go. That's why I am where I am. There might be a couple that seem to contradict that on this list, but I wanted to let you know up front. Everyone knows I'm a huge Buffy fan. They think that's going to be number one. That's not. That's not. That'll be a list for a different time. Let's start with number 15, and that is Fringe. Yes, the short-lived, I don't want to say short-lived, 4 seasons on Fox. To me, it was very, very X-Files of the time. It felt very X-Files-y with its Monster of the Week, but it had a large overlapping arc, and it dealt with multiple parallel universes and multiple realities, and I love stuff like that. Very Stephen King. And yeah, it was another one of the J.J. Abrams brainchilds before he went absolutely nutty, which is a conversation for a different time. I know it's very unpopular to say you appreciate anything that Bad Robot did now after certain things have happened recently. But at the time, I think he was still full of fresh ideas. And Fringe was very, very cool. Very, very slow burn, but it had a terrific cast. The main 3 of them just had terrific chemistry together. And like I said, the Monster of the Week stuff was okay, but their main overlying arc was absolutely stunning. Some of the best long-form storytelling I've seen, especially from Fox. Fox, you know, who's just famous for canceling anything that doesn't get like 20 million viewers per episode. And sci-fi is still a very niche genre that's not going to draw those kind of numbers. You know, they're expecting Star Wars style ratings on television. That's just not going to happen, at least not usually. So I think that that's always going to be one of the big complaints there with Fox. And I think, you know, there's a specific series that comes to mind when you think about Fox and canceling stuff too soon. But Fringe, very good. It ended sooner than it should have, but still very, very satisfying. And I have the box set. I'd love to do a rewatch of it one day because is it John Noble who played Walter on there? Absolutely amazing performance. That's Denethor from Lord of the Rings, by the way. Number 14 didn't have quite a happy ending because of cancellation. That is the 4400 on the USA Network. This basically took the idea of all these people go. There's a show they call The Leftovers, which I haven't watched, where all these people disappear. I feel like this is kind of similar in that all these people over the course of 50 years have just disappeared, and then one day they all just appear back somewhere, I think in like Wisconsin or something like that, or Seattle. I don't know, it's been a long time. And they all just arrive back on Earth at the same time from different periods in time. And it's about them trying to adjust back into normal everyday life. But they all start to develop supernatural abilities, superpowers. So it's one of those kind of things you feel like you've heard done a million times, but it really, really did it in a way that, again, very X-Files. That you could tell that all these things were trying to corner the next X-Files, because X-Files was going off the air when this started. And I think it was probably the closest. It came the closest. Very, very sad that it ended when it did, because it still had so much left to tell, and it ended on a cliffhanger. And that's the real bummer about this. But spectacular writing, wonderful main duo. It was very Mulder and Scully in a way that nothing else has been able to capture up to this point. And I'm sad that the fan revival thing wasn't really big back then. I know Jericho got it pulled off, and now it seems like Netflix or Amazon saves everything that gets canceled by major studios. But this is one we would have at least one more season to let them tie up their loose ends. It would have been great. So I wish the fan campaign had been a little stronger. But the show is so much better than me just talking about how it was canceled. It's really spectacular. Very patient of the week, client of the week, monster of the week, whatever you want to call it, but in a way that did not get exhausting at all, like maybe some X-Files episodes did, which I'll talk about. Number 13, going back to my childhood with this one, Quantum Leap. This is what made Scott Bakula known to me. I had never heard of Scott Bakula before. I don't even know if he did anything before this, but Scott Bakula and Dean Stockwell became just, no matter what they did after this, I was going to watch. One of the most fascinating concepts ever put to science fiction with someone who would leap to someone else's body in a point in their life where he has to figure out how to right a wrong in their life, and he's not able to jump to the next body until he actually achieves that. So it was basically like the ultimate anthology series in that every episode was different, but each one he kept hoping that his next leap, as it said in the credits, would be his leap home, where he'd go back to himself. So very well received, critically loved. I feel like everyone has nothing but great things to say about it. I feel like there's been several things that have tried to copy it. I've heard they're trying to reboot it, which would be depressing. The only way that I'd be on board for a reboot is if Scott Bakula played Dean Stockwell's version in the new series. That would be pretty neat. I would be okay with that. But definitely one that I think has aged decently. You'll go back. I mean, it was very forward thinking at the time too. I mean, it had all these social issues that people are absolutely batty about on television these days. It had all of them for a lot of things we're still too scared to approach these topics. So it covered everything. I mean, he leaps into a woman, he leaps into civil rights activists, all kinds of stuff. It is really out there. And the Lee Harvey Oswald episode, so good, so dark, man. So yeah, very classic sci-fi there, but a brilliant concept. Now, number 12, you probably expect this to be a little higher because everyone knows I'm a big Joss Whedon honk. Firefly. And the reason that Firefly is where it is because longevity's got to count for something in this for me. And as brilliant as its 14 episodes were, it was just 14 episodes in a movie. So it's hard for me to put it above some of these others that have had more content. Now, more content doesn't always mean better. But I feel like in my power scale here, it kind of takes away from it. Absolutely wonderful. Has some of the best dialogue, and that is what I think that Joss Whedon was able to do in his heyday, was the brilliant dialogue. I know a lot of people got tired of it with the second Avengers movie, but as someone who, Buffy was it for me, seeing him touch on sci-fi was just absolutely wonderful. And a lot of things I feel like try to kind of do the Western frontier Star Wars mix like he did with Firefly, and it hasn't worked like at all. But it's one of those things where I always wish that they'd get a revival together, but it's been so long now. None of those actors are free at the same time. It just wouldn't be the same now. So it lives on in the comic books, much like Buffy did. So there's that. But yeah, very much a missed opportunity with Fox on this one. Because, I mean, you just look at the legacy that this show has built off of the short time it was together. And I mean, you go to a convention and you'll still see people cosplaying as browncoats because it was just such an impactful series. And it's just a shame it got cut down when it did, because it was absolutely brilliant. A true Western in space that I feel like no one else is going to be able to replicate ever again. Number 11. This might seem kind of new to you, but I think 3 stellar seasons makes it kind of stand out for me, and that is Stranger Things, because this is basically an ode to all things Stephen King for me. I obviously am a big Stephen King fan, and I think that Stephen King stuff kind of straddles one foot in the supernatural, one foot in science fiction, so that's why I went ahead and counted it here. You're dealing with Upside Down, which is a parallel dimension, so to me this classifies as science fiction, even though others might not agree. obviously the throwback is really cool to people of my generation, seeing all the stuff that we loved as kids, you know, brought forth back into pop culture. Modern pop culture is obviously a really cool thing, but everything from the music to the feel to the aesthetic to the way that the kids talk to each other is just terrific television. And there's a reason it's basically Netflix's flagship, because it is that good. And what I find absolutely just wonderful about this series is it doesn't matter if you grew up in the 80s or not. I know people half my age that enjoy this series just as much. And it put more eyes on my dude Stephen King, and I'm always for that. It got new readers interested in Stephen King. And you can't deny the influence of Stranger Things. Almost everything tries to rip it off now. The It movie that they made tried to be Stranger Things. I'm like, what are you guys doing? Stranger Things was trying to be Stephen King. Why are you guys trying to be Stranger Things? So that's you can see my It reviews for how I complained about that. But yeah, you can't deny the influence of one Stephen King in that. And Stranger Things is by far my favorite show on Netflix. It's just brilliant. And it's not just for the nostalgia. I know a lot of these things is just nostalgia. With this, it's just good television. It really is. And I think, like I said, the varying age groups that love that series just proves that that is true. Number 10 will seem kind of weird because I did not watch the classic series. And I'm talking about Doctor Who. I did not watch the classic series. My earliest memories of Doctor Who are my parents telling me and my brother to go do something because they wanted to watch the last episode of Tom Baker as the Fourth Doctor. That was my earliest memories. I didn't ever really watch the series, but when it relaunched, I kind of put it off for a while, and then I started watching the series when it came to, at the time it came to Netflix, I think in 2016, and I watched the relaunch. That's Christopher Eccleston, that's David Tennant, that's Matt Smith. That was all that was out at the time, the 8th, 9th, and 10th Doctors. And, wait, 9th, 10th, and 11th Doctors. My fault. It's been a little bit here. But here's the thing. I absolutely ate the show up. I love it. Yes, at first it was really low budget. Again, to me, if you have quality characters and quality writing, I don't care about the budget. That's just gravy. Once Matt Smith took over, they had some real money, and I felt like the show's production value really, really rised. You had... If you're an American, you might find the British stuff a little strange. Just like I'm sure if, you know, BBC people watching American sci-fi might think it's a little strange. I don't think that's anything wrong to say. But to me, I was able to latch onto it really quick. When I first started, I said, it's kind of like Harry Potter meets Bill and Ted, you know? And that was how I sold it to some friends that got really into it too. But the big argument always now is like, you know, who's your favorite Doctor and stuff like that. Look, I wept when David Tennant left. I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to go on with the series. And then Matt Smith came in. I absolutely fell in love with him right away. So it's just one of those things that every time a Doctor leaves, you're always like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And then the new Doctor shows up and you love it. I kind of fell off on the show recently, which I won't get into because I know where that leads. But yeah, I loved it through the Capaldi era. I thought it was a pretty solid show. But what really got it for me was, if you watch a series, it basically tells you, yeah, the main character is going to die every 3 years, and it's going to rip your heart out, and you keep watching. That says something for the legacy of a show. And yes, this show hits you in the feels way more than you would ever expect just a fun, goofy science fiction series to do. It really, really does, because you get so connected to those characters, so connected to those companions, and when bad things happen, and bad things do happen, it's just absolutely devastating. But so much quirkiness about the sci-fi. I don't think, besides Farscape, I don't think a show has ever been just as quirky and would just go for it with some of their alien creatures like Doctor Who did. So it definitely deserves its place here in the top 10 for me. Number 9. I can't think of a cooler cat growing up than Rod Serling, and that was because I watched The Twilight Zone. It was on Nick at Night when I was a kid, and it was one of those things where my parents were very sheltering. They were very religious. They were very sheltering what we watched, but they were okay with us watching the Twilight Zone because, you know, I guess they watched it when they were younger. And me and my brother, we just ate it up. It was the first time I'd ever watched anything really in black and white, and I thought that was so vintage and cool. And it's just one of those things that I would not want to watch a colorized version of a Twilight Zone. I think it makes it creepier. But some of the most classic tropes in sci-fi now that have been done to death, Twilight Zone was doing them first. And this show did social commentary before anything else, I think. I mean, and it's just some of the guest stars that you see on the show. That William Shatner, like some of these people who went on to be bigger actors that you never really expect to see when you go back and watch them now. You know, I got that Blu-ray set a couple years ago. We just started rewatching all of them. And I'm stunned at how old it is, but how dark and sinister that show will go. It was never afraid to leave you with an unhappy ending, which at the time period was just unheard of. So yes, vastly ahead of its time, and it's still rather amazing. It is interesting to see how fascinated we were with outer space at the time, you know, because this is before we even went to the moon, you know, so it's really a good time capsule of where, you know, American minds were at the time. And it's a show I think has aged wonderfully. New series, no. I know a lot of people like carry on about Black Mirror, which I still haven't watched. And they're all like, oh, it's amazing. Every episode is like a new cast. And I'm like, so it's just doing what Twilight Zone did 50 years ago? So I don't know if that's a fair criticism. I don't know. I haven't watched Black Mirror. So there it is. But Twilight Zone, I would absolutely say check it out, and I would definitely watch a new X-Files episode, a new Twilight Zone episode if it aired tomorrow. And I just spoiled my next one, number 8. That is the X-Files. And I know that some of you might think, oh, Mike, but you said that, you know, no, there's no space, there's aliens. Hello, that counts. X-Files was targeted for me. I was very, very, very much into the JFK conspiracy at the time. Still am. And when this came out, it was one of those. It was during a time where you still believed that American government was competent enough to keep secrets from us, and it was just perfect timing. And your two leads were just magnetic. No one was cooler than David Duchovny in 1993, right? And Gillian Anderson. She could still call me today. So yeah, that's like my first TV wife there was Gillian Anderson. But it's just a brilliantly done Monster of the Week long-form storytelling. It had its Monster of the Week episodes, which were almost always great. And there's some stinkers. When you got a show that's on for 9 seasons, you're going to have some stinkers in there. It's going to happen with science fiction. But I think for me, the dark conspiracy cover-up Men in Black kind of thing really made that show what it was for me, where it was like they would have these absolute huge revelations and you'd kind of feel like, okay, I need to catch my breath. And they'd be like, okay, here's a couple Monster of the Week episodes for you to calm down, and then we'll get back into the heavy stuff. And it did that balance pretty much perfectly. After Duchovny left the show, look, I like Robert Patrick, but it just wasn't the same. They were very clearly trying to do passing of the torch. I can't even remember the other girl that he was working with that wasn't Scully. I can't remember. They were very clearly trying to do that. It didn't work, and audiences rejected it, and they tried to get Duchovny back, and it was just a big mess towards the end. So I think this would probably be higher than 8 if Duchovny and Anderson had stayed together the whole time. But yeah, just a wonderful show that's aged. If you don't mind seeing like cell phones that are like this big and stuff like that, I think the technology obviously is going to be like a what? It's aged terrifically. I still watch them all the time on Hulu. They're still very, very good. And some of those episodes are so freaking dark that you cannot believe that they were on television. And it just, again, this was my teenage years, man. I loved the X-Files. That was can't miss TV for me in the 90s. And it's still really good. Number 7, Lost. Now, I know that a lot of hot takes about Lost. You know how everybody's all super critical about how Game of Thrones ended? Yeah, multiply that times a million. That was how Lost ended. That was how people felt about Lost. Social media wasn't huge at the time. I think MySpace was the biggest thing when Lost was on TV. But sticking with the Game of Thrones comparison there, you know how everyone was just like super obsessed with their theories and stuff like that? That was nothing compared to Lost. Dude, people were writing freaking novels trying to explain what they think was going on in Lost. It was that deep. And yeah, we got towards the end and we realized, yeah, they never knew where they were going the whole time. But getting there was worth the journey. Yes, the ending really let me down. That's what keeps it, from being, a top 3 show all time for me. But no one has been able to do the flashback thing as well as Lost. It's tried to be replicated a million times. Remember that show Flash Forward? Oh, yeah. Everyone tried to do that formula after Lost went there, and no one has been able to capture the same sense of mythology that show captured. And I mean, I still got my Dharma t-shirt. I should have wore my Dharma t-shirt. I still got a Dharma t-shirt because I was obsessed with that show when it was on. I had my own theories. I used to write, remember blog posts on MySpace? I used to write theories about why I think that this person was this and why it was connected to that. But that flashback scenario really, I think, helped keep it from feeling formulaic because it gave you something new every episode while also slowly unraveling the mysteries of this island. So that's a show I'd like to revisit, and maybe time will have made me be less critical on that last season, but I doubt it. I doubt it. But yeah, it doesn't deny the fact that those first 5 seasons were just stellar TV, at least for me, and that's why it's as high as it is. Yes, I have to break up my single take that I did in this video because I realized I forgot something that was very, very important. When you just kind of make this list just off the top of your head, you don't actually write this stuff down, you have some mistakes. And there's one I kind of want to fit in, and it fits about right here in between a Lost and, I'll go ahead and tell you the next one will be The Expanse. So it fits right in between those two here, and of course I am talking about Dark on Netflix. If you have been a fan of this channel at all, you know I have been championing this series for about the last year. This is by far the most intelligently written show I have seen in a long, long time. But here's the thing, it challenges the viewer. It not just because if you're in the States, it's in a foreign language. It's in German. They have dubbed tracks, whatever. They're pretty bad. So we just left on the German and read the subtitles. But here's the thing. That doesn't take away from it at all. I mean, this is a reading channel after all. But it challenges you in that it gives you no answers, really, very often. It just presents question after question after question, very much in a Lost kind of way, in that it's dealing with multiple timelines. But unlike Lost, they knew where they were going the whole time. And it was just 3 seasons. It's all on Netflix, guys. You should absolutely watch it. But it ties up damn near everything in a perfect, satisfying way. But again, just how intelligent that show is and how well written it was just really stands out. I mean, there's so many times that I thought I had it figured out, and then bam, out of nowhere, completely surprised me and caught me off guard. And what I mean by it challenged you is like there are multiple versions of each character from different timelines, and it's stuff, like I said, you really, really got to pay attention to it. But just the most brilliant time travel type of show I've ever watched. And one of the things I think that really just super hit a home run for me with this is that the casting was superb, in that usually on most shows, when you have say you have a mid-20s actor and they need to cast the kid version, like, oh, just get someone with the same color hair and that can be them. No, what this show did to hit a home run with the casting is that they casted by the eyes. They casted people who had these same eyes to play the young version, the middle-aged version, and the old version of each character. And that way, you saw this character and you knew absolutely from go who it was. And that is the most brilliant casting director I have ever seen. Oh my God, someone in Hollywood pay attention to the casting director for Dark, because they have figured this out. They know how to actually make this work. And I think that is just something I can't say enough about, on top of how well written and how well acted the show is. So guys, please, if you respect science fiction, smart, intelligent writing, like I said, it's going to make you think. It's going to make you think. You're going to be like 4 episodes in, you're going to be like, this makes no sense. I mean, there was times when me and my wife were basically arguing because we didn't understand what was going on. So yes, it is that deep, but it is so satisfying. It is very, very satisfying. I've seen it taking on a lot of new life lately. Saw Stephen King actually tweeted about it. And whenever the King tweets about any type of programming or a book, most people usually take note. But I'm happy to say I was ahead of the King on this one. It is very, very brilliant, and it's probably one that will only go up on this list over time. But I just couldn't put it above the next ones. And let's get to those next ones now. Number 6, The Expanse. I know so many people who are like, it's just a sci-fi channel. And you know what? That reputation got earned. Sci-fi channel put out crap quality TV shows for a long time. So I understand why people didn't want to take that show seriously, and it ended up getting canceled. But thankfully, Jeff Bezos loved the series, and he has a lot of money, so he picked the series up. And apparently, he was always rubbed the wrong way. He wanted to buy that series when it was first available for TV, and Sci-Fi kind of stole it from under him, which is just amazing to hear about. But regardless of all that, The Expanse is such a better show than just, hey, this is a show that was saved from cancellation because of the fans. Look, this is by far the most scientifically accurate television I have ever watched. It puts such an emphasis on physics and gravity and how space is scary as shit. it does it in a way that basically Gravity is a character on this television show. And it's just stunning. You know, you'll watch so much sci-fi TV and they'll do something, you'll be like, yeah, that wouldn't work. But this, it's like, yeah, they got the science right. Apparently they keep scientists on staff to make sure that they're getting the science right. That's brilliant. That's brilliant, brilliant television. And it seems like it's probably, 4 seasons in. It might be a little new. They've got great source material that they're working off of, the Expanse books by James S.A. Corey. But it seems like over the course of time, this series might go down as my favorite science fiction television series ever. I've got it at 6 right now, just because it's still so young, but I definitely think it is trending in the right direction. And guys, this is probably my favorite show on television right now, next to, with Vikings and Last Kingdom. The Expanse is every bit as good as anything that you're watching right now. So if you haven't watched The Expanse, please do. I tell people give it 4 episodes because it is a big, heavy drop at first. It drops you into this world, and you're just like, what is going on? And it's a lot to take in. But if by about the 4th episode, if you aren't in, it might not be for you, but I'm thinking it will be, because it is just brilliant, brilliant television, and some of the best and most flawed, damaged characters I've ever seen on TV. And it absolutely nails what all programs should be doing with the whole diversity argument right now. I definitely think that. Watch my Expanse, why you should read the Expanse video for what I mean further on that issue, because I talk about the TV show some on there. But definitely check out the Expanse if you haven't. Definitely moving up for me over the course of time. Now, here was my first tough pick. And this is because I'm talking about Star Trek at number 5. And trying to stick to just one. I love the original series. I love The Next Generation. I love Deep Space Nine. I could do without Voyager or Enterprise. The new stuff, that to me, that doesn't register. This was a really, really tough pick for me. And here's the thing. The one that I don't pick would be in this list as well. But for the sake of this list, I did it this way, just to try to give it some conversation. I'm going to go with Deep Space Nine as my favorite Star Trek series. And I think that's because I am such a sucker for serialized TV. I need a long arc. The Monster of the Week thing kind of got burned out for me all those years watching X-Files. With Deep Space Nine, you had Ronald D. Moore and Stephen Ira Bear, who were, got their chops on writing for the Next Generation. And they were the ones who kind of proved that you can break away from syndication TV, which is why everything had to be, closed-ended episodes, and you could do long story arcs. And it was on season 4 of Deep Space Nine through the very end, 4, 5, 6, 7, and namely the Dominion War, that is just some of the best long-form television you will ever see. And the thing is when Next Generation came out, I said, well, you can't ever replace that crew, and you fell in love with the crew. With Deep Space Nine, well, there's no way they could be as good as the Next Gen crew, and I fell in love with all of them. It's just amazing job by Moore and his team to what they were able to write. And when they brought Worf over from Next Generation, that's what put it over the top as the best the best Star Trek series that there was. And I absolutely loved it. Look, I tortured myself making this pick. I really did. But Deep Space Nine's long storytelling arc and the finale just, not even going to talk about it. Not even going to talk about it because I'll get emotional here. Just brilliant, brilliant TV. It's all on Netflix, guys. Please, please watch Deep Space Nine, because I feel like it is the black sheep of Star Trek shows, maybe along with Voyager. And I don't get it. I think it is just stunning television, and it's just a brilliant, brilliant writing. And it led Ronald Moore to a show I'll talk about in a little bit. Number 4, another tough pick, because while I love Stargate Atlantis, I have to go with Stargate SG-1 because I love that crew. Teal'c and Sam and Daniel and Colonel O'Neill. That was my ragtag sci-fi group for a decade, man. I loved SG-1. I liked the movie when I saw it. Look, huge Kurt Russell fan, so I would see anything he was in, and I liked Stargate. SG-1 by season 3, I was saying this is the best science fiction show on TV, and second isn't close. This was wonderful, wonderful job at the Monster of the Week. It did it perfectly. When you set up this gate system where they're jumping to a new gate every single week, and then you'd have like a big bad for each season that would kind of show back up randomly, kind of using that Buffy format where you have your Monster of the Week, but that big bad is always present in the background somewhere. That was brilliant television. And dude, to me, Richard Dean Anderson was MacGyver, and I was like, I'm never going to be able to not see him as MacGyver. Now I'll see like a MacGyver rerun on, I'm like, hey, Colonel O'Neill. And I mean, for that really just got through. And I mean, so many quotes I use in my daily life are Colonel O'Neill quotes. I still say, indeed, about everything, like Tilkwood. If I have apprehensions about the show, it's just that, you know, they teased us so long about Colonel O'Neill and Samantha Carter, you know, but again, that's not ever going to be a detraction. I guess. I joked when I did my live stream that if I ever did a live stream, it would just be talking about me and like 8 other people talking about our favorite Stargate SG-1 episodes. Well, it turns out that people probably actually want to do that. I love this series. Yes, after Richard Dean Anderson, he wanted to take a reduced role. He didn't want to travel. He wanted to spend time with his family for those last couple of years. And they brought over some Farscape veterans, which was really cool, but it never really felt the same. But those first 7 seasons, absolutely brilliant sci-fi television, even today. Yeah, some of the special effects are dated, of course, but as you'll see with some of the other stuff on my list, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter at all. These characters were wonderful. I love them. And those 4 actors' chemistry together, along with the gentleman that played General Hammond, absolutely stunning and just a achievement. I mean, this is the reason this is one of the longest running science fiction shows of all time, because it was just brilliant television. And it makes me sad that they can't figure out how to get a new Stargate show going. I know that they've tried with Universe, which was, I didn't really care for it. They did an animated show. Personally, I think Atlantis had at least 2 or 3 more years in it, you know, but it is what it is. I hope that they can revive Stargate somehow, some way. Not a reboot, but just a continuation of that universe. I would definitely be down for it. Moving along here to number 3. Do you remember when Guardians of the Galaxy came out and everyone was just absolutely like, wow, I've never seen anything like this? Well, I went and saw it because I won't lie, I'd never read the comic, and I don't think that 90% of the people that told you they had read the comic had read that comic either. I went in with low expectations, and after I left, and I absolutely loved it, I was asking myself why I loved it, and I said, well, because all it was like the biggest budget episode of Farscape that I have ever seen. Farscape was an incredible science fiction series that had Muppets in its main cast. Yes, Muppets. For you who don't know, if you're a little younger, that is a mechanical puppet. We grew up in the area of Jim Henson, Fraggle Rock, things like that. So we were all about the Muppets. You know, the Muppet Show was a gold standard when I was a tiny child. And when you saw that moved into science fiction, and you had 2 main characters like Rigel and Pilot that were Muppets, and it worked to a point to where you eventually started thinking, I don't even look at them as Muppets. I just look at them as characters, and that is just brilliant storytelling involved with just absolutely wonderful special effects. And I think that Farscape is like along with Firefly, as the biggest like tragedy of a show that was cut down before its time. Now, unlike other things out there, that was a show. I mean, Firefly got its movie, you know, but Farscape got a made-for-television miniseries. It was like a 4-hour miniseries wrapping up all their loose ends, and it did so decently or whatever. But Farscape, for 4 seasons, this was the quirkiest and weirdest and most fascinating science fiction show I had ever watched. Had absolutely stunning characters and just crazy plot twists, and some character deaths. I think at a time when people were still scared to kill their characters off on TV, Farscape was the first one I saw killing off main members of its cast, and it was just absolutely shocking. And it cut every single time. But it wasn't just the makeup and the special effects and things like that. They were all nice, but that crew, it was different to me because I had looked at stuff like Star Trek, where you have your chain of command, and everyone respects that chain of command. In Farscape, these are all people that you think at first, they're all out for each other. You know, they're out for themselves. They're at each other's throats all the time. So people have a hard time kind of connecting with that. But it's the bond that these misfits form over time is what makes that such a beautiful story. And it's just absolutely wonderful. One of the best villains I've ever seen in television, in Scorpius. Absolutely amazing job by Wayne Pygram. I can't say enough about him. And I mean, Crichton was the man, right? But Dargo's my boy. Absolutely wonderful cast. They all nailed their parts. They just went for it. They didn't care if it was weird. They didn't care if it was, you know, overly sexual. They didn't care about any of that stuff. They wanted to do it. They went for it. They even made a freaking animated episode one time. before a lot of other series were doing that. You know, most now usually always have like their musical episode. They had a Looney Tunes episode basically, and it was just absolutely hilarious. But again, some of those shocking TV deaths I've ever seen, and just the big moments in that show where they'd have like their 2 or 3 part episodes. Wonderful, wonderful television. And that's one I've revisited numerous times since it went off the air. Made my wife watch the whole thing. She actually loved it. And again, if you like Guardians of the Galaxy, I have no idea why you wouldn't like this, because everything about that, you can look at every one of the members of the Guardian Galaxy and you can pick out who they were in Farscape. It's really, really like that. It's just wonderful, wonderful TV. So please check it out if you haven't. It will always be dear to me. Number 2. God, this was hard picking between 2 and 1. Very, very hard. And I feel like I flip back and forth on it all the time. If you're on the Discord, you probably know, because I talk about this show quite a bit. And I'm talking at number 2 is Babylon 5. I had never watched a science fiction series at the time. This was the mid-90s we're talking about here, that was serialized, that had a long form storytelling arc. We're talking like season 2 through 4 was one story. It was really almost like to be continued at the end of every episode. It was like watching a movie broke into 20 episodes. Sure, the special effects are hilariously bad now. In the 90s, they were ambitious as hell, you know, but it didn't matter. The writing on there, J. Michael Straczynski, brilliant. This guy had a plan of the beginning, middle, and end before he started. Yeah, there was some fuckery with TNT, and he had to end up rushing his story, and he thought the show was getting canceled, so he wrapped everything up. And then they said, oh, no, we're going to give you an extra season after all. And then he had to kind of make up something on the fly for the last season. Season 2 through 4, best science fiction ever made. There's only one reason it's not number 1. That's because season 1's just okay, and season 5 was because for reasons not his own. But I can't say his name. The main actor that plays Captain Sheridan, easily my favorite science fiction captain. Yeah, he is wonderful in every regard. The type of guy that you would go to war for. He was. What I've said about the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown is how much I love Darrow's speeches and how they'll make you want to fight for him. Same with Captain Sheridan. I would fight for this guy no matter what the odds. But yeah, J. Michael Straczynski's writing in this was just stellar, absolutely stellar. And the gentleman who plays G'Kar, man, that is a powerhouse of an acting performance. And it's one of those things where at the time you felt like, okay, science fiction, it's still kind of hokey, whatever. This was the first one where I felt like science fiction TV can be very, very serious and very realistic and have thespian actors that really, really buy into their roles. And the gentleman that played G'Kar, I can't think of his name right now, he absolutely stole the scene every time he was in it, because he was just that good, because he really, really bought into this world that Straczynski created. And it's absolutely wonderful. I tell people, if you're struggling with that first season, stick with it, because you're going to be super, super impressed with where it goes. And there is one moment in season 2, God, I can't think of the episode number now, but they actually won a Hugo Award for it. It was so good. But just the emotion that you'll feel, not because of a character death, not because of something really sad, but because of something super powerful. We're talking like Ride of the Rohirrim in Lord of the Rings powerful. It is just such a kick-ass moment. And this was the first science fiction series I saw where the ladies were every bit as badass as the men, sometimes in more regard. Ivanova, oh my gosh, she is just a beast. One of the best. I mean, I can't say enough about that whole group. Garibaldi is one of my favorites. I could make a whole episode that's just about Babylon 5. And it's just a shame of what happened to it at the end there that would probably put it to number 1. And guys, do you know what number 1 is? I mean, I'm sure you've been peeping the shirt the whole time. So say we all. Battlestar Galactica, the modern version, is my number 1 science fiction show of all time, for a multitude of reasons. I watched the original one when it came out and I was a kid. After Star Wars, I just wanted anything that was more sci-fi. And you know what? Even at that age, I thought it was pretty hokey, pretty corny. So I was concerned when the reboot was happening. I told myself, it's probably going to be a little weird. But, you know, hey, give it a fair shake. At the time, I was watching just about anything on Sci-Fi Channel. Stargate was still on. Farscape was still on. And I thought, sure. Actually, I think Farscape had just ended prematurely. And I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And I was just absolutely stunned by what I found. I was watching The West Wing a lot of the time, and I was like, holy cow, this is like The West Wing in space. I really believed that. It had I still say that the in-world politics in Battlestar Galactica, best I've seen done on television. They are stunningly good and amazing. I mean, you just see, we're down to like 40,000 people left in the human race, and the politics are just as brutal as they were, on Caprica. So it takes everything that you would love about a standard science fiction series, puts basically a real-world spin on everything. Yeah, there's social commentary in there for sure, but not like it is today. It's actually like thought-provoking, not accusatory. But what I tell people is this is the best show on TV that takes place in space. But at the time, I was like, I can't think of a show that's actually better right now. Maybe Lost at the time. That was about it. But Edward James Olmos is a beast in this series. Every scene that man is in, again, that's someone I want to fight for. But the whole mystery of who was a Cylon and who was not. At first I thought this is just a cheap ploy so they don't have to use the CGI to make the Cylons. It worked. It worked really, really well because, I mean, for 5 years we're arguing, I think this person's a Cylon. How could that happen? I went, wait, this person's a Cylon? What? And it was the first series where if you missed an episode, you were lost. You were absolutely lost. That was unheard of for science fiction at the time. If you missed an episode, all of a sudden you'd be like, wait, number 3? What are you talking about, number 3? Anyway, wait, that one's a Cylon. What? Cylon? Number 6? What are you talking about? It just had the best fan community that I had seen for a science fiction series at the time. And it might just be because, the internet was blowing up. We were still doing bulletin boards back then, but, things like Reddit weren't really huge yet, but you had so much speculation and theories on Battlestar Galactica. And here's the best part about it. It got my wife into science fiction. My wife is an educator. So when you have this whole idea, this is how I sold it to her. I said, well, what's really cool about it is all of the politicians basically get nuked, and the highest ranking person left is the Department of Education and Laura Roslin. And so basically a teacher becomes the new president of the world, the new leader of the world, of the surviving race. And I got her to watch it, and she just absolutely loved the series just as much as I did. And on a rewatch, every bit as good. And the last episode will make you bawl like a baby. So sure, there are lots of things I think that people still argue about on it, but I think that just kind of builds on its legacy. That people are still talking about it, 15 years after it ended. About 15 years. How long has it been now? What was it, like 2008 or so? All right, so it's been a while since it ended, right? And this whole like gender swapping thing that's just like the craze in media now. I feel like Battlestar Galactica was like the pioneer of it. They made Starbuck a female, and it was awesome because she was an awesome character. So yeah, you might see more people like upset about that, or more people that are for it or whatever. At the time, it was just like, wow, what a bold decision, because it wasn't just like what everybody was doing.